Bună ziua și bine ați venit la o nouă emisiune de Educație Financiară, marca FinZoom.ro și BusyLife TV. Eu sunt Irina Chițu și reprezint comparatorul de produse financiare FinZoom.ro și astăzi vom afla mai multe despre un subiect destul de controversat, aș zice eu, și anume operațiunea de cunoaștere a clientelei, care este obligatorie pentru bănci, de fapt pentru orice business, dar de foarte multe ori e contestată, să zicem așa, de către clienți sau unora li se pare supărătoare. Deci ne-am propus să vorbim despre experiența clienților și ce fraude se previn prin această cunoaștere a clientelei și apoi despre securitatea plăților, despre plățile intrabancare și viitorul plăților interbancare. Invitatul de astăzi este Thomas Bernert și vă spun două vorbe despre Thomas în română, urmând ca apoi să trecem în engleză. Thomas s-a alăturat echipei ING Bank România în rolul de Chief Risk Officer în august 2018, deci acum 2 ani, și are peste 20 de ani de experiență la nivel global pe segmentul de retail și commercial banking, în special pe zonele de trezorerie, management de capital, risc, conformitate. De asemenea, deține o certificare Chartered Financial Analyst și ce aș putea să vă spun așa personal este că locuiește în România de 2 ani cu soția și cei 5 copii în București. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, Irina.
Hi. So I just told before in Romania that you have 5 children, so
I understood a bit, yes. Thanks.
You beat me to the number of children, so I rarely find such person. So next interview will be related to children financial education, yes?
Yeah, that would be good, indeed.
I'm sure you have expertise on this. But let's go back to our topic for today.
Sure.
So meaning about KYC, know your customer. To translate.
Know your customer.
Yes. What is exactly KYC?
Yes. So indeed, I think the term we in the financial sector we use the abbreviation KYC on a daily basis, and I think it stands for Know Your Customer. Outside the banking sector, it's probably little known. We try in ING to make it understood as a passport for banking. So I think it's the easiest way to compare it with. So if you want to travel, you need an identification document, best a passport. If you stand in Autopane and you want to leave with the next plane, you need to have a valid passport. And KYC is kind of like the passport for banking. So we need to have information about you as a customer in order to allow you to do the banking. And the best way to compare is like on the passport you have biometrical data. Yeah, there's your eye color, there's your height, in order to be identified. This doesn't help me, have your eye color as an identification, but what we're looking for is what is the source of funds? What's the source of wealth? What is the amount of transactions that we think you would do outside Romania, for example? So we ask these kind of questions in order to create some biometrical data and provide you a passport that allows you to bank with us.
Mm-hmm. So it's important, and I retain this information that it's a passport, and we needed a valid one. So what are the main challenges for the banks to implement it?
Yeah, so the reason for us is obviously to get information about the customer in order to determine whether the transaction that is currently happening in the customer account is legit. Because it could be that somebody else has taken over the account, so we want to protect the customer from a fraudster acting and taking the money away. But also we want to prevent that money is taken away from is washed into the system, and so hence we have to put a lot of processes in place. And the way I like you to picture it is a bit like a triangle. And at the bottom 2 corners, you have on the one side the risk management team of a bank, that is familiar with the regulation and is in contact with the national bank. And there's a lot about effectiveness. So we're saying, okay, we need to have these things in place in order to be sure that whatever is happening in the customer's account is legit. And then on the other side of the triangle, you have the operations department, which makes all these things happen. You know, there are so many processes that have to be synchronized, and this is the team that can best optimize these process flows. And then at the top of the triangle, and I think that's also why I like to use the triangle. At the top of the triangle is the business, is the customer focused team that will say, look, I understand it has to be effective in that way, and I understand this is maybe the best efficient way, but it is not customer friendly. And hence, we need to find the constant balance between these three corners of the triangle. All three corners of us are in constant dialogue with the IT department. The IT department is key in this day and age of digital banking. And all of us are trying to implement tools to make the process more effective, but come up with robots to make the process more efficient, but also come up with maybe systems and interface to the customer to make it easier for the customer to deal with us. And I think that is that constant loop that we're going through in order to keep these three corners very balanced. And that works at days, that works, and some days it doesn't work, but this is for us the constant challenge that we're going through, and other banks do as well.
I like this that you have put on the not on the bottom, but on the peak of your triangle, in one of the corner, but on the peak of the customer. Yeah. So, but if we are going back to the basis of the triangle, yeah. So what is the legal basis for this KYC?
Yes. So you know, it is not just a Romanian thing. It is a global thing that is happening to all banks, to all financial institutions. It applies also to insurance companies, for example, or investment companies. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, there was a financial an AML directive given. AML stands for anti-money laundering. That directive was given back in 2015. And over the last few years, the different European countries in the European Union have adopted this into their local law. Some countries were really fast. They did it already in 2017. Romania took a bit longer, and we adopted it in 2019 into the local law. There's a law, you can look it up. It was approved last year by the Romanian government. It's Law 129. And this law basically demands the banks that are active in Romania to collect that information about the customer, but also to take certain other activities into account, like reporting transactions to the financial authority, and also look for suspicious activity. So this law, AML law 129 from last year, is the basis for us to go about it, and it is an evolving law. There's more to come in the future years as well.
So it's mandatory. That is important to be realized.
Correct.
And also is mandatory for the fintechs.
I think it is. That is the next stage where I can see this entirely evolving. There is a fifth AML directive that has been approved already at the European level, and the different countries are in process of implementing that. The fifth directive is casting the net already a bit wider. So now also art galleries, real estate houses, anybody that exchanges normal fiat money into currencies, virtual currencies, would be then included in that financial group of institutions that would have to report transactions above a certain threshold to the authority. And if you imagine that, then I think the authorities that are there to really at the end fight financial crime, and banks play a very important role in fighting financial crime. We can see the flow of money in the normal currency, right? In euros, in US dollars, in Romanian lei, we can see that. But the moment the money gets exchanged into virtual currencies, that is at that moment where I think the insights then go missing, and this is probably then the next step where this whole thing evolves, and that's where probably also then any tech company that is involved in virtual currency will feel the same pain that we went through in the banking sector in the last few years to establish that monitoring.
Mm-hmm. So it's mandatory for each business that is dealing with money, not only the physical money, but also virtual money. Okay. What are the bank's rights for this in this operation, for instance?
Right. So I mean, obviously, the questions that we have set out from the beginning in the know your customer process start right at the opening of a relationship. So it might well be that at the opening of a process, a few questions lead to answers which the banks might not feel comfortable then to say, I'm opening the relationship with. Or simply saying, this is, if you do, for example, too many cash transactions, I'm not feeling comfortable with that. And hence, I deny or reject the opening. So it starts right there. There is a right on both sides, obviously. And it goes through the entire process that also there's a right to collect this information. And there's a right then also, if this information is not provided, to at a later step to actually end the relationship again. So it is all around that law of the AML to collect that information. And if the customer would not cooperate, obviously the relationship is at that moment broken, and hence these are the rights of the banks to act that way.
Mm-hmm. And if we are talking about the customer's rights.
Mm-hmm. So I think obviously the customer is concerned about the privacy of the information. What is the information used for, right? And I think here there is the right for transparency. The customer can call and say, like, hey, you have ask me all these kind of questions. What are you doing with that information? How long is it stored? At what moment will it be deleted, for example? And these informations, this right for transparency and also the right for protection is obviously there for the customer. And we as banks will answer these questions to the individuals if we are asked that way.
But all this, does this go against GDPR?
I don't think so. I mean, GDPR, which stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. There's a number of principles in the GDPR. It starts with the lawfulness of something, right? And I think here the underlying law is for us the AML, which forces us to demand that collected information. It is about a fair and transparent process. I believe we have provided a lot of details on our website also in terms of these privacy and security of that information. And it is the most important thing for me in GDPR is the purpose limitation of when data can be used. And I think there's probably still a bit of a misunderstanding. Why does the bank ask all this information? Are they now trying to, come up with a profile to sell me the next television set? This is not the idea, like the purpose is limited to simply create a profile of the customer and compare that profile to the daily transactions in order to find suspicious activity. And this suspicious activity is there to protect the customer from anything that is going. Somebody could take over his account and take his money away, but also to protect the system. And that is the limitation. We would not collect that information to then come up with the next commercial campaign to sell some products to the customer. That is not the idea. But I think that is for me the core of why I believe the GDPR principles apply, and I think we have a fair and transparent process around it. Yes.
But for instance, in GDPR is the right, let's say, to be forget. Yeah, it's applicable also in this case.
Yes, it is. I think
if a person asks for this.
Indeed, I think there is obviously we have GDPR rules around how long data would be stored. So if we had a customer relationship exited at a certain point in time, we have the right to hold that information for a certain period, which is also determined. And after that, the information is deleted. And if the customer years later shows up again and says like, hey, I want to open a relationship, there's nothing that we would use from the past to hold against it. We would compare to anything at that moment that the customer presents.
So the consumer should understand that also exists this regulation that you should keep the data for some period of time, for which is depending of what exactly you use this data for, but it's legal and you should keep it. Also after this period, they will be deleted if they ask for this. Okay.
Exactly. We have data retention requirements that are indeed coming from GDPR. So we have ourselves policies in place which give different timelines for different sets of data. And after that data or the time limit is reached, the data will be automatically deleted. And that means if the customer would show up after that particular point in time, there would be no data available to check and hold against the customer. Everything is then a fresh relationship.
Okay, and the clients are notified regarding this need to update their data?
Yes, I think we have taken a very proactive approach there. We are starting pretty much 3 months prior to the expiration date when this banking passport is coming due. We're starting 3 months before to inform the customers on the different channels. Obviously, we have the email address of the customer. We have the telephone number. We give customers call. We send messages. We have in our home bank app, we have banners placed there. And obviously, the closer we get to that expiration date, the more active we become, because we just want to avoid the situation where this whole relationship freezes. So the goal is for us indeed to nudge and urge the customer in that 3 months period to take the action and update the relationship, or update the information with us so that we can continue the relationship. And we have like 3 moments in the 3 months period where we kind of like, again, send a reminder, give a call. And I think it differs a bit by customer type, but in principle, it is a 3 months period, which we have seen as sufficient for most customers to work out that way.
But who is setting this expiration date? So it's the same for all the banks?
No, it is. Yes, it is a good question. There is in the law there is a flexibility given to all the banks, and I think all the banks try to align a bit around that time frame of between 1 year to 5 years, roughly. I think when I look at different surveys that are done amongst banks, somewhere between 1 year to 5 years is the review period. And the law gives all the banks the chance to take what we call a risk-based approach. So we could say, okay, if we believe that a certain customer profile is a bit more risky than another, we could have it a bit more frequent. And in principle, we could ask the customer every day for information. If we see a transaction that doesn't feel to make sense, we could reach out immediately and say like, hey, we need some information about it. But also that is a huge strain on the operation, so we try to minimize that as well. So every bank is trying to be between, like, I think it is 1 to 5 year area, and I think that is also in coordination and was what the regulator expects, how often these kind of relationships should be reviewed.
I see. And if a client refuses to update their banking information, what is happening?
Yeah, I think if we look at the relationship in itself, if a customer indeed passes the review date and has not updated information at this very first moment, we are asked to freeze the account. So if there's any incoming still, we will collect these incomings for customer. We will try to get in contact with the customer because it is his money, and we want to know what we need to do with it. But the customer can at that moment not do any more transactions, cannot go to the ATM machine and get the money out. The account is literally frozen, and we have to find a way of either getting the update done later so that everything gets reactivated, or the customer might have a reason to not give us the information, and then we would like to have another banking contact from him where we can then just transfer the money, and it would be then the customer exit. So that is the scenario around the relationship. Obviously, we also report on transactions. So if the law requires us to detect suspicious activity. So we go every day through millions of transactions, and if we find some transaction that on first appearance looks suspicious, but we need additional information, and then we would call the customer. And many customers provide us information, say, yeah, look, I had a bigger cash coming in because, I got married, these were all presents, or I had to sell my car. So there's all legit reasons. And once we know these reasons, you collect it, you say, okay, there's nothing suspicious about it, we move on. But obviously, if a customer does not provide that information, it makes that transaction even more suspicious. Like, why does he not provide that information? Because it's for us then that the next step would be then to report such an activity to the financial authority and say, like, look, it's a suspicious activity. We cannot explain it. It looks strange what happened here. It doesn't match the profile. And from then on, it is a bit out of our hands, and the financial intelligence unit would take over.
For the customers that hear us right now, so could you tell us more transactions that they need to explain to the banks? More examples.
More examples. So I think indeed, if I look at our monthly activities, so we have roughly 50 million of transactions that happen every month in ING Romania. It's a lot of transaction, right?
You have 1.4 million.
1.5 million customer, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So indeed, if you take a look, so every customer more or less on average 35, 40 transactions probably. Some do more, some do less. And yourself, many of the transactions are you got your coffee in the morning, maybe got some shirts from the dry cleaner, you get some lunch, do your grocery shopping. Many of these transactions are totally unsuspicious, non-suspicious, and they go through the system. But there is a 1 to 2% on a monthly basis that we feel need better explanation. And these are transactions where there is abnormal high cash transactions, some international transfers that were not known to us. Again, if a customer reveals to us he is unemployed, but suddenly there is a lot of incomings from overseas, it doesn't feel right, and it could be, a good explanation is maybe he had inherited something, but very often there is no explanation at all, which gives us a reason then to say, okay, we probably have to report it because we cannot explain it.
Also, it's applicable to, for instance, for the transaction with the cards. For instance, if my card is suddenly used in another corner of the world,
Indeed.
Your system is detected and
indeed. Yeah? Mm-hmm. I think this is a really good example. And again, I can from that example I can give you the two rationales why we need to do it. The one thing could be that somebody skimmed your card, and you're not even aware of that your card information has been skimmed and has been sold to somebody outside the country. And now while you're sitting nicely having dinner on a weekend, somebody else is swiping your counterfeited card somewhere to buy some nice luxury stuff. So for us, it is obviously there to protect the customer, to say, look, these are transactions that are happening outside Romania. We are well aware that this cannot be this customer. So it's for customer protection. But then there's also situations, unfortunately, where fraudsters, and we call them money mules, people that are trying to help criminals to wash money through this in the system. They're trying to obtain people that help them with that. And what we see sometimes happening is that some customers open an account with all legit information saying, I'm unemployed, I'm having a small income. And that is all legit information, but then they give these cards away. They sell them. And they get a small amount of money for that. But then these cards are shipped somewhere, let's say West Africa, right? And then suddenly one day you see money coming in and it will be taken out in one of these ultra high-risk countries. This is really financial crime activities which we have to stop, and we are very, very committed to stop these activities, for which we again need customer information so that we can really put our systems in place to stop these activities the moment we see them.
So this involves a certain amount of money when we are talking about these big funds that are
right.
So you have a limit where you look for?
Yeah, so there is, again, I think if you look at our requirements, the law has a magic number in that, and that is basically and that is, there is no suspicion around that number. It's simply say, okay, for statistics, please, any activities, is it cash or transfer, especially if it's international, above 10,000 euros, you have to give me every month a report. Which transactions, which amounts, which customers, and that is going to the financial intelligence unit, and they have their statistic information there. If some fraudsters are listening right now by any chance and say, like, oh, let's be smart, let's be, do it in two amounts of 6,000, that doesn't work. We are also required to do these transactions based on cumulative amounts. So if you see somebody doing two transactions of 6,000 internationally to the same, we would have to add it up, and it's above 10,000, we would report it as well. That is the standard statistical reporting. And then on top of that, we are required to report any suspicious activity. And for that, we have different type of systems in place. We have our standard system is what we call a post-transaction monitoring system. So every evening, we take all transactions of the day and we let them run through an engine that has a number of rules and scenarios included. And we have different amount sets. It is definitely amounts smaller than 10,000 euros in order to give us a bit of a hint which transactions seem to be suspicious. And then we have another system that is also doing pre-transaction monitoring. So before the transaction is actually being executed, we look whether this transaction can even make sense for the customer, and we would stop something before it even is happening. So we have put a number of rules in place where the system is helping us either intraday, live when it's happening, or after the fact to monitor the activity of the customer and give us then an alert. And then this alert is looked upon by people and say, okay, these are good transactions. I know that, fine. Or here I have to get some additional information from the customer. Or, hey, here's something really suspicious going on, and you better report it to the authorities. So it is a bit like finding a needle in the haystack, maybe to add there, because out of these 50 million transactions, maybe it is 200, 300 that at the end of the day, every month would get reported. So it's a very tiny percentage, if you will, over the total amount. But it is big amounts mostly involved.
Actually, it's not so small amount if each bank is reporting so many. So because you should, after this, analyze all these transactions and so on. And if because we are very close to to our end, I have a final question about that. Yeah. How you see what is the future in terms of safe transactions?
Well, safe transactions. So I think obviously I think the law is evolving, and as I mentioned earlier, beyond banks, more and more institutions get included there. So I think people will get more creative on the criminal side, and banks have to react to that, and we probably have to implement other tools. So like the idea of, I'm not just taking your picture, I'm taking a live picture, or I'm looking at your, how fast you move your thumb on your telephone in order to determine whether you are probably a fraudster or you are just a normal customer. There's all kinds of digital tools available these days to determine whether the interaction with the customer is a real legit interaction, or whether there is some suspicion involved there. So I think as fraudsters and criminals become more creative with all the technology that is there, banks will so too, and we will start to implement more and more things. And the goal is overall always to make it easier for the customer, but then also to keep the system protected. And as said earlier, I think the next step for financial institutions and for the regulators will then be to bridge that into the new virtual currencies, because this is then where still the next monitoring activity has to take over.
Yeah, so thank you, Thomas, for this interview. So I think it's very important also for customers to retain this, that this know your customer operation, it's important not only for the banks, for the businesses, for the state, but also for their own protection.
Correct.
Like you said, the passport for banking, and we need this valid passport. in order to make all our transactions in safe, yes?
Yeah.
And also to be protected by for instance, like you said about the cards, for the identity theft. So
indeed, I think it is there.
We need to protect.
Exactly, it's there to protect you as a customer and to protect the financial system from any misuse there.
Okay, and like a final statement: don't run away when the bank is asking for your.
Indeed, it is not.
Your contact data to be updated, because it's for our own good.
Indeed, it is everybody's contribution to make the system safer, and I think we are not selling you the next television set just because we have your data. Exactly.
Okay. Thanks a lot for this interview.
Thanks, Irina.
Good luck in everything that you are making in Romania,
right.
in ING Bank, and stay safe.
Thank you.
All our customers and all our persons near us.
We'll do so. Osi bună.
All the best. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.